With the recent Mortal Kombat DLC including Jason Voorhees, it got me thinking recently about one encounter I had with someone on Halloween when I was 14 years old. I was around that time in my life where most kids my age would stop trick-or-treating either because they thought it was lame or their parents told them to stop. Me and my father had a similar conversation. In the end we decided this trick-or-treat would be my final one. So when October the 31st came, my dad helped me paint my face to look like a zombie. I figured that this costume should be simple yet something I liked, so zombie it was. I grabbed an empty pillowcase and then headed out, with my parents telling me to be back by 11ish. Before you ask, yes, I was going trick-or-treating by myself. I was able to convince my parents that I needed to get as much candy as I could, seeing as how I wouldn't be able to do the same again next year. So off I went running from house to house, shoving candy into my pillowcase as fast as I could. So by the time it got dark, my pillowcase is about 3/4 filled and I had no intent of slowing down. As I'm about to walk into a new neighbourhood, a black van pulls over to the curb that was about a few feet away from me. The door opens and out of the darkness comes a guy in a hockey mask and a tattered jacket, wielding a machete. He turns his head towards me, probably just trying to creep me out. Nice Jason costume, I say, trying to be friendly as I begin to walk past him. Thanks, zombie. You want some candy? I've got bags of them. He says this as he pulls out these little white sacks of candy. So me, being the idiot 14-year-old that I was, opened my pillowcase and let him plop 2 of the sacks into it. Make sure you eat them real soon. You'll love them, he snickered, which really sent a chill down my spine. He left as quickly as he came, but I just shrugged it off as I needed to finish trick-or-treating. I continued down the road and again going from house to house for candy. After about the 3rd or 4th house, I noticed something odd. It was the same black van from before. After every house I went to, the van would get closer and closer. At around 10:30, I headed home with my sack full to bursting. As I walked, the area behind me illuminated. I turned around, expected to see the car that would soon pass me. It was the van. In the driver's seat was the same Jason Voorhees who gave me the candy. My heart stopped and I broke into a mad dash back to my house, the van easily keeping up with me. I was luckily able to lose him by running into the woods near my house. I exited the woods that lead to the side of my house and looked for the fake rock that held a spare key to our house. After I got in, I put my candy on the kitchen table and somehow found a way to go to sleep. The next morning when I woke up, my parents were sitting at the kitchen table digging through the bags of candy that Jason gave to me. They started asking who I got the bags from, which started to freak me out. I would later learn that the bags of candy were nothing more than just bags of prescription drugs. There was a ton of sleeping pills in them, and I finally understood his intentions. He was gonna follow me until I fell asleep, then do God knows what to me after he got me in that van. Now that I think about it, I'm not sure whether or not the machete he had was fake or not. The police came up empty-handed, so I guess I'll never find out his fate. If you're reading this, Jason, let's not meet again. I have more under my belt, but here's a memory from when I was younger. My dad was the coolest guy on the block, probably because he was one of 3 black dads who lived in our town. The population is around 98% Caucasian, and that's not an exaggeration. He was a state police officer, intimidating, wore Oakleys before the hipsters, and was generally a rough sounding person. Damn do I miss him. But the one thing that he feared most was Halloween. He would tell me and my sisters stories at night about his life when he was in high school in the slum of New Jersey, and that every Halloween crazy things would happen. He may have been pulling our legs a little bit, but we didn't care. When Halloween would roll around, he would take us out trick-or-treating while Mum stayed at home. One night in 5th grade, Lexi and I were dressed as a witch and a 50s poodle skirt girl. Dad held our hands walking down the last street when I realised I'd lost Mum's scarf she'd let me borrow. She loved that thing, so we walked all of the way back towards this darker corner of our street. It's by the woods and a small stream, but when you look, it's very dark and you can't see anything. Dad said he'd seen something and walked towards it. When he got there, he started slowing down. He was staring at something in that dark and we couldn't see it. Lexi called out to him if he found Mum's scarf. He told her to be quiet and started crouching down, looking in the distance. For several moments we stood there waiting. I could make out that scarf above his head, tied to a branch. He untied the scarf, still staring into the dark and then backing away. Then he did some scream and sort of shuffled backwards. It was a low, throaty scream, like he was furious. He was swearing too, but I don't remember what he was saying. Whatever Dad had been staring at then bolted out of the trees and then ran down the street opposite to where we lived. It was a little child, probably a little boy, in a black costume with skeleton bones on the front and a skull mask. When Lexi and I tried to go over and see what had happened, Dad yelled for us to stay back. He got onto his ancient cell phone and called Mum to come and pick us up. His next call was the local police. We left before we could see anything, but the next day Mum told us about the dead, skinned animals that had been found. By the time us kids could go look, they'd taped off the place and taken out the bloody animals, but there were stains on the pavement and the smell was pretty bad. The kids talked about it in school for a little while, and I was curious if they ever caught the boy. Nothing came out in the local papers though, and it was quickly forgotten. Dad could have told me more, but it was the last Halloween we'd spent together. But I do remember him and Mum arguing for the next couple of days about never letting us go trick-or-treating again. I was 12 and out trick-or-treating with my best friend, also 12. Back in those days, it was not unusual for older children, including females, to be unescorted by adults. We lived in an older area, now a suburb of a major city, suitably dressed in costumes and as usual running along excited. We were several blocks away from either of our homes. We didn't know anyone in this particular block, but the houses were mostly well lit with front porch lights and many had carved pumpkins on the steps or near the door. This was one of the main signs that the household was giving out candy. Almost all houses back in those days were well lit, as it was pretty common for nearly everyone to give out candy. I remember where this particular house was, on 4th Street, about midway on the south side of the blocks. In this area were some houses of the kind built by early settlers before city codes, often somewhat odd, with different parts added later on. Anyway, we get to this one house and it has a walkway right to the top of the house. This leads to a few steps up to a door, but the door is wide open. My friend and I pause on the steps, a bit uncertain. Of course we had been warned not to go inside any houses, but this is what? An extra long porch. We see a long empty hallway that appears to be built along the side of a house. It's odd, but the hallway or porch, if it was, is very well lit, and at the end of it is another door. Beside the door are 2 carved pumpkins. This is obviously a trick-or-treat door. So after brief hesitation, we forged ahead. We knocked on the second door, and a woman in her 30s, ordinary looking and not too friendly, opened it and gave us some candy and then shut the door. We had turned around and we were halfway back down the long hallway when suddenly stepped out a man who had been hiding behind the first open door. He shut the door and then stood in front of it, blocking our exit. My friend and I froze in our tracks. This man, probably in his 30s, mid-size and average looking, stood for a few seconds not saying anything, but seeming to enjoy the effects he was having, mainly having scared us speechless. Well, it was Halloween, a scare and then a laugh maybe, might be okay, even unexpected, perhaps from someone's goofy dad or uncle pranking it up. But this guy just stood there blocking the door and not saying anything and staring at us with some smug, creepy smile. Finally he said, "Don't you know you're not supposed to walk into strangers' houses?" But he still didn't move away from the door. We continued to stand there, frozen, not saying anything. After some freaky silence, he said, "So, what are you going to do now?" I knew the way he was looking at us, it was more than a scary prank. It was creepy and weird. I don't know what my friend was thinking, but I was thinking if he doesn't open that door very soon, I'm going to run back and pound really hard on the second door until that woman answers it. This happened for maybe a couple of minutes, the creeper gloating and leering at us while blocking the door, but it seemed much longer. Finally he stepped over, grabbed the handle and disappeared behind the back of the door. We bolted out of there like a pair of jackrabbits. My friend and I looked at each other as we ran away, but continued on trick-or-treating down the street. We never discussed how weird it was later, and we never told our parents. So, creepy, leering guy who blocked the door, let's never meet again.